Good morning. We are live on the Falcons Podcast. It is Wednesday. We are on YouTube and Twix right now. I'm going to bring in my Atlanta Falcons on SI Facebook group, 26,000 strong or so on there. See if we can't get a few more meta folks to come join us this morning. Then we'll get going on this lovely Wednesday. It hasn't rained yet today. It's due later, I'm sure. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. It is Wednesday. We are in the dog days. It's the middle of June. We got Falcons mini camp. We've got big-time jog-throughs, to quote Coach Raheem Morris. We've got Kirk Cousins. We've got Kyle Pitts questions. We've got Michael Penix. We've got all that stuff going on live at Flowery Branch. They have day 2 today, day 1. Again, there's a lot of excitement with a lot of new players. And unfortunately, a lot of what goes on is, okay, who's healthy, who's not, who's there, who's not? What are some of the personnel storylines? Because, the question of who looks good and who doesn't is really, really hard to answer at mini camps until they start popping pads. And for me, really, until they start doing joint practices against somebody that has a different color helmet on, it's really hard to get an evaluation on some of the camp battles that are going on. But we'll get into some of those that we will expect to see, because there are several camp battles that are going on. And on the first day of mini camp yesterday, mandatory mini camp, the big story yesterday was who was there, who wasn't there, who was participating, and who wasn't. So a lot of the talk before camp, after camp, during camp was surrounding Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts. And as far as I'm concerned, we've gotten some closure on Kirk Cousins, where we've talked about him ad nauseum since he was benched. I think we've gotten some closure on that. And we'll get into that after we say some hellos for everybody. So we're going to do that right now. Make sure I'm unmuted again. We're going to do that right now. I want to say hello to Austin. We go live every Monday and Wednesday because we like having a conversation with you. I like this to be interactive. I want to know what's on your minds, and then I'll let you know what's on mine. So good morning, Austin. John Harrell, good to see you. Says good morning, Scott and Nick and the Falcons family. Yeah, I want to say Shannon has come in, and Shannon Davis says, good morning, Scott. Prayer for Nick. Hope his family is okay. His wife has been battling a fever. It's been sick for a while now, like over a week, and finally admitted her to the hospital. So he single dadding it while he's, his wife's trying to get better. And then poor Nick, then his dog gets into like this toxic medication, and he's yanking it out of his mouth and running into the vet yesterday, getting his stomach pumped, but everything was okay. We kind of joke every time that Nick comes on. He's like, yeah, somebody else is sick. I'm sick. This is sick. Well, this time it's like knocked him out of the podcast. So he needs to move south. He needs to come down to Charleston and get in the South, a little calmer way of life. And it's yes, prayers are with Nick. He's having a rough go of it right now, but hopefully he'll be back next week. But I wanted to talk with y'all. I was out Monday. My best friend from college got married, and I was out like till midnight, which is late for me. And I got up. I was like, there's nothing to talk about. I'm not going to force it. We'll see y'all on Wednesday. So we'll be back on next week, mini camp recaps, that type of stuff. So don't plan on missing anything, but it will be just me today for sure. And for the near future. So good to see you. And thanks for thinking of us, Shannon. ECU Falcons. Good morning, guys. Happy Father's Day week. Yeah, I guess that is. Those are the kind of things that slip by fathers till your wife reminds you that your father's has a Father's Day coming up. It's great to see all the boys out there for camp. Excited to see all the competition within the positions. Hope it pulls out the best of each player. ECU, I'm with you. You've heard me say it a bunch, and I will keep saying it. The ugly C word that I heard last year was comfortable. I heard comfortable way too often. I get a twitch on my neck and my eye starts flickering when I hear that word coming out of Flowery Branch. This year is competition. Now, not so much on offense. Those guys are pretty set. When you return 11 starters, there's not necessarily going to be as much competition. But on the defensive side of the ball, there's competition everywhere. And I love it. Denver Luke, good to see you. Good morning, Scott and Nick. And good morning right back at you, Luke. Thank you for the super chat. Certainly appreciate you breaking the ice. And yes, he's got the coffee emojis today with my Lion coffee, with my dragon mug. And remember, as Nick says, choose kindness and compassion. We don't eat our allies. I've got from Lion Coffee today, I've got the toasted coconut. Damn, it's good. It's really good. And not only that, it makes my office is in a room down in the basement. Whole basement smells like toasted coconut coffee, man. It's much more pleasant than what it usually smells like down here. So good to see you. Yes, happy coffee day. Thanks for the super chat and getting us started on that. Terry Clark, good to see you. Good morning, ATL. That's all y'all. Coach Scott and Nick. Larry, what it do? What it be? How you doing, man? Sam Klontz. Hey, he's got some advice for everybody. Hit that like. Yeah, we've got a lot of new faces that have come in. So if you're one of the new subscribers to the channel, say hello, leave a comment. Love to hear from you because it's grown a lot through the summer and will continue to grow. You know, something we're doing right on YouTube is growing nicely, like kudzu in the South, right? Xavier Littman, good to see you. He's got the red and the black going on. And let me see here. Sambo, good to see you as well. And August says, props to Cousins for showing up for minicamp and embracing the situation. Let's get into that, y'all. August 809 kind of brings it up. 809, I've got an 86 and an 813. So I'm right in between there for birthdays for my kids. So not quite 809. But let's get into Kirk Cousins here. You know, I've been as skeptical as anybody. You know, y'all know that. I'm a cynic. I've always will try and tell people and teach people and educate people that there is no such thing as unbiased. There's no such thing. Our personalities are made up by our experiences. We see the world through our experiences, and those are biases. That's okay. That's who we are as a person. Bias is what makes us up. Now, do you recognize your bias? Do you admit your bias? Can you compensate for your bias? A lot of people cannot. They don't, and that's part of being a fan. I will tell you flat out, growing up an Atlanta sports fan through the 80s, and the Falcons and the Braves and all this stuff, I am a cynical SOB. I am biased. I don't ever expect my team to win. Everything's going to go wrong. That is my bias. I'll tell you that straight out. But the Kirk Cousins situation, it has not been an ideal situation for sure. But I think everybody kind of got together and said, this is the situation. This is what it's going to be for a year. We're paying you $100 million. We can't get any kind of return for you in a trade market. Unfortunately, nobody wants you. Suck it up, play good soldier for the next 6 months, and you're out of here in January because, again, the cap situation becomes a lot better after this year for cutting him. It was always a 2-year deal. Play good soldier. We'll say nothing but good things about you. You embrace the situation publicly, gnash your teeth behind the scenes, and you can live with that for 6 months and we'll move on. Now, it's harder for a older quarterback like that because his biological clock is ticking. But Kirk Cousins came out and said, listen, you know, do I want to play right away? Sure. That's not the situation right now. I can't control that. That's off-season talk. That's done. Now I'm in camp. We're here to win. I'm here to help. I'm here to be the best I can. Good for him and all the things he said publicly. And I think, you know, he was really, really candid yesterday for someone who has literally avoided Atlanta media since last January. You know, when he's at the Super Bowl and some of the Atlanta beat writers would come up to him, he's like, no, we're not talking to you, but he'll talk to national guys. He's avoided Atlanta media. He was very candid about his injuries, not just injury, but injuries, saying, you know, I think in my mind, I thought I was probably a little bit farther ahead than I was with my Achilles, which is to be expected. Now, mobility isn't his strength, so to speak. But you could tell, you know, he wasn't all there. He was not driving off that back foot. And he said the strength was okay, but the flexibility in his ankle was really poor. Wasn't quite as far along, but he was still doing okay. And then, again, the injury in his shoulder and arm and wrist and elbow and all that after he took that hit, I've stuck up for Kirk Cousins for this, and I will for life, because he is a competitor. Competitors want to compete. They do not disclose every single injury they have to the staff. They don't do that. That's just normal. That's football players. That's baseball players. You know, I don't disclose. I don't let you know every time something's bothering me. I want to be out there. They had to put concussion protocols because players would go out and play if you'd let them, and most coaches would send them out there if they could. You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Well, no, they're not. They send out injured players all the time. That's expected in the NFL. But Kirk Cousins just basically said, I'd had something similar to this, and it just wasn't getting any better. So I thought what he did was kind of humanize himself again, remind us that, hey, here's a person here, and there's two sides to all this. And I thought he was very, I thought he was very candid and reminded people that, like, I'm not going to be a problem for this. And as long as you're not a problem for a team, as long as you're wearing the colors, you will be backed by fans. So, if he wants to play good soldier for the next 6 months, I think basically this is quiet. This is a non-story for now. We've gotten, how I want to say this, is closure, so to speak. This is your role. Everybody's accepting it. Unless something happens, yes, you have a decent trade piece now, but go play good soldier and let's move on. That's my take on what I saw yesterday. Kirk Cousins, I think, will be here at least, until somebody makes a decent offer, but I don't think we're going to hear about all that stuff anymore. Now it's time to get to work. So that's my take on it. I'd be curious to hear yours. I'm going to say hello to some folks that have come in since then, while you kind of get your comments together too. Tony Bradley, good morning. It's good to see you. Michael Ronquillo, the Sunrise, he's sitting here as well. Jamal says, good morning, Scott, and everyone in the chat. That's all, y'all. This is Rise Up. Yep, we're Rose. Michael, yeah, prayers for Nick for sure. And Chris, he's over on Facebook. Good morning, Chris. He says, good morning, Scott, and everyone watching. Michael Lewitsky, Island Mike down in Puerto Rico. Good to see you as well. Harry's here. AJ. And Steven says, it's not easy to spend all the money. Talking about Kirk. Yeah, again, from Arthur Blank's point of view, he's like, yeah, we've already paid him. we're okay with him doing the job that we've already paid him for. Again, it's $100 million. We're going to pay you $100 million. You can be a grown-up. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Is this an ideal situation for you? No, but you know what? For your trouble, we're going to pay you another $50 million. Okay, yeah, I can live with that, I guess. That'll be okay. And, as Michael says, hope Kirk is telling the truth. Even if he's not, he doesn't have to be happy with the situation. He just has to put on a good public face. Be a professional. In the building, be a professional while you are training for your next gig. That's all you're asking for, and that's fine. That's part of this business. We weren't expecting him. As soon as they drafted, even before they drafted Michael Penix, they said this is basically a 2-year deal with the guaranteed money, $100 million guaranteed over 2 years on a $180 million contract is basically a 2-year, $100 million contract with some dead money in year 3. We're still on schedule for that. And Stephen B says, nobody minds if a quarterback hides an injury and then throws for 40 touchdowns. Well, yeah, again, they don't mind if they do that, but it's up to the coaching staff to make that change. It's not up to the quarterback to pull himself. They're not gonna bench themselves. Yes, whatabouts. I don't play the whatabouts game. 99 out of 100 guys aren't going to pull themselves out unless they absolutely cannot go. That's competitiveness at this level. That's pretty normal. Tony says, let's be real. The Falcons have the best backup quarterback in the NFL if Kirk stays. I've pushed back on this a lot just because there's personalities involved. But the second part of this, I guess, is Raheem Morris. Now, Raheem Morris is relentlessly positive. Again, I joked that he opened up the press conference yesterday with big time jog through. Talking about what they were doing yesterday. Yeah, we got a big time jog through coming up. I'm like, yeah, those are kind of contradiction in terms of, and he basically said what we all know. We're not really doing anything, but just teaching people where to be and when, and doing it in a jog through. So that's what these camps have become. There's not a lot of competitiveness in them during OTAs and during minicamp. But I pushed back on the idea that Kirk, who doesn't want to be in Atlanta and they didn't really want him, is going to be a great backup. Those type of people don't make great backups. But again, if they can kiss and make up and say, after the offseason stuff with, I was hurt. No, he wasn't. And we benched him for football reasons and all this stuff. And yes, we drafted a guy, after we said we weren't going to when we signed you and just the bad relationships. Like, listen, this is a 6-month short-term relationship. Let's everybody play nice and move on. It will be best for you for next year too. And I think Kirk can embrace that. And if he's accepted by his teammates, which he should be, then yes, I will flip on this and say, okay, he can be a good backup. Still not my ideal situation, but there is no ideal situation because this was a bad deal. But I'll soften that stance. I'll soften that stance some. Corey says an agent on Dukes and Bell said yesterday that he still thinks Cousins being released is the most likely scenario. I don't think so anymore. There's no financial reason for it. Again, and if he's willing to come in and be a professional, then there's no reason to release him this year. You release him next year. That was always in the cards just because of the way his contract's set up. The guaranteed money was for 2 years. You're financially tied to him for 2 years. Once your dead cap is lower than your salary cap hit, you become vulnerable. Can I save money by cutting you? That's when you become vulnerable as a player. Now I need to provide enough value that you don't want to save money by cutting me. You want to keep me. And, well, as a backup, obviously, if his dead cap is lower than his cap, he's toast. Well, it's about $20 million in savings next year. I think his salary cap number escalates to like $57 million and his dead cap goes to 33. I can designate that as a post-June cut and take $16 million or 20 and 13 across 2 years and save $35 million in cap space next year. He'll end up being on the books for 4 full seasons, but it'll go from what's his cap hit this year? 40? It'll go from 40 down to 33 that you can spread across two seasons next year. But yeah, he'll be cut next year for sure if he's not traded this year. But I don't see him getting cut anymore. There's no financial reason to do it. And Raheem Morris, for all the uber positive coach speak that he has, where damn well you're not getting genuine answers. Just, what's the most positive way I can say this? It felt heartfelt what he was saying about Kirk Cousins. He's like, listen, all the drama has been outside. The type of person that Kirk is, we are comfortable with Kirk being in this building because we know what kind of person he is. All that, when he said it again yesterday and then listened to Kirk, I kind of believed it. Now, what I didn't believe was him talking about Kyle Pitts. Oh, Kyle Pitts is, Kyle Pitts has really been becoming and has increased his role and becoming a more well-rounded tight end. And that's why we saw his role increase last year to become a more rounded tight end. No, we didn't. We did not. That is not true. What we saw last year was him being mitigated to the bench and relegated to the bench because he isn't a well-rounded tight end and he wasn't catching the ball that great. He wasn't the weapon at receiver that he was supposed to be, and he was a liability at blocking, and we saw his snap counts go down. Charlie Warner played more snaps than he did the last 6 weeks of the season. We didn't see that. That's the kind of stuff where I kind of roll my eyes sometimes during these press conferences. I'm like, well, that's, I know you want to, there's a difference between like throwing a guy under the bus and then just, rewriting history on that one. So, and AJ says, my only question is, what if Kirk comes, he's fully healthy now. He says he might have actually been at a 3 and he feels like physically he's at an 8 now. What if he looks fantastic in camp and Penix looks okay? Kirk knows the offense already and showed he can perform. What does that do to Mike's head? Nothing. Michael Penix is a starter. They have thrown their lot in with Michael Penix. As long as Michael Penix is healthy and performing even at an adequate level, not 1 touchdown, 9 interceptions in a 1-5 record. Then we have questions. Then we do have questions. At that point, I think, though, you're selling. If Michael Penix fails, you then become a seller at the trade deadline. So Michael Penix is your quarterback, and it's like, okay, well, what do we need to do to get Penix going? Penix will get 2 years as a starter, in my opinion, as long as he stays healthy. You're not going to go out there and see, who's a who went out there and got a year and was just so bad he didn't get it? Zach Wilson was one of those guys. And even he started getting the second year. So I don't see, AJ, I do not see a scenario where a healthy Michael Penix hits the bench. It's almost beyond comprehension right now, because if Michael Penix gets benched, he has failed and this team has failed and everybody's being fired. Oh, that's the way I see it. Bryce here coming in with a question. Good to see you. He says, are we more likely to have a top 10 defense or offense? Bryce, this is easy. This is the easiest question I think I've ever gotten on here. Offense. It's not even close. The Falcons, people don't realize this, and I'll say it 100 times over. And I've written it twice today into editing it into articles. The Falcons offense last year in total yards finished 6th. Technically, they had a top 10 offense. They had 6th in total yardage. Now, they finished 13th in points, but they were 6th in yardage. Randy Drum, I think, was on Facebook, was in a little bit of a conversation on Facebook talking about it. He says, yes, it's not ideal to be paying your backup that much money, but I try and look overall at the quarterback cost. And he put in the base salaries, which is a little misleading because it's really about salary cap. So I put that in there and I'd answered. I'm like, yeah, but you have the number 5 outlay for the quarterback room in the NFL. The Falcons are paying the 5th most to the quarterback room in the NFL. That's not ideal when you're starting a rookie quarterback. A rookie quarterback is supposed to be a cheat code where I can take the $40 million that goes to a second contract franchise quarterback and I can invest it in other places around the team and build around him. That said, I was like, all right, but what was the Falcons' passing offense last year? Well, despite the fact that Kirk Cousins fell off a cliff, and despite the fact that Zach Robinson was a first-year offensive coordinator and a first-year play caller, despite the fact that Cousins played so poorly for a month, for a quarter of the season, that he was benched for a rookie, despite all that, the Falcons' passing game was 5th. The 5th biggest outlay at the salary cap, the number 5 in total yards. So in total yards, they were number 5. Well, all right. You're getting decent value in your quarterback room there, even if it's not quite how you wanted to do it. But if I'm getting value at each of my positions relative to what I'm spending, well, then that's okay. If I have a number 5 passing offense and I'm paying the number 5 amount to my quarterback room, well, kind of makes sense. The defense could jump up 10 spots and still be bottom, probably not 3rd. Yeah, probably bottom 3rd. This was a bottom 3 defense last year, Bryce. In all of the metrics that matter. Now, I just went and said total offense for the offense and made that. I know. So I'm being a hypocrite here. I'm cherry picking my stats, right, to prove a point. What is it? Stats, lies, and whatever the saying is. So in total defense and yards and points, they were bottom 3rd, but they weren't bottom 5. But a lot of that was because the other team was playing keep away, which is really impressive considering the Falcons were able to be number 6 in yards with a crap kicking game last year and then poor red zone offense, despite the fact that they were getting less touches of the ball because their defense couldn't get anybody off the field. The other team's offense, opposing offenses against the Atlanta Falcons defense, the Falcons finished bottom 3, bottom 5, bottom 3 in yards per drive against, points per drive against, plays per drive against, third down percentage. They were last in completion percentage, 70%. 17 freaking games. And opponents completed 70% of their passes against the Atlanta Falcons prevent base defense. Real easy to chuck the ball underneath when everybody's 30 yards off the line of scrimmage and there's no pass rush. The Falcons would have to have a monumental improvement to get to average, to get to 15. If they get to 15 with this offense, they're going to be freaking dangerous come playoff time. If in the metrics that matter, if they improve 10 spots and they're a 20th ranked defense in third down percentage and getting teams off the field, time of possession, turnovers, they make some improvements in turnovers. even being just average, say 18th, this is not just a playoff team. This is a dangerous freaking playoff team. So, no, the Falcons aren't going to have a top 10 defense. I think Bryce and Falcons fans, when I was looking this up, I think the Falcons have only finished like top 10 3 times in the last 40 years. This isn't going to be the year. There's too many new faces, young faces. But moving forward, Jalen Walker, Jesse Bates still has 5 years in him. AJ Terrell's still on the younger side. Ruka Rohoro is a young player, second-year guy. And if my 2 fire-breathing edges that I just took in the first round become guys, then the pieces are there to build into that. And, on the offensive side of the ball, the really only thing I need to look at over the next couple seasons is, well, everything. I mean, you do everything because offensive tackle still worries me. Jake Matthews is getting older. Caleb McGarry is Caleb McGarry. But as far as like, if I could pick one guy right now, a young guy right now for the offense, I'd probably go wide receiver. I think I like the wide receivers for the Falcons. When Drake is Drake. Drake is really good. He's underappreciated for, he's got that I'm on a bad team syndrome. Darnell Mooney had a great season last year. Ray McLeod played well. Kadero Hodge is a bit player, but an injury to Drake and this team's in trouble in the passing game. If, I don't count on Kyle Pitts. If he becomes something great, I think wide receiver and offensive tackle become priorities on that side of the ball in 2026. Want to say hello to Sam. Sam, good to see you. Thank you for the super chat. He says, "Morning, Scott. Let me ask what everyone wants to know. Are we taking a field trip to training camp in July?" We'll see why not. Have to check the schedules and stuff on those. As y'all know, the Falcons isn't the only site I run. I've got several on SI. This is the one I'm most personally involved with on the content side because it's the one I know the best. And sometimes they come along during podcasting days. I'm like, I can't go to camp. I miss podcasting days on Mondays and Wednesdays. But I do plan on getting out there. And a lot of times I sit up on the hill with the fans. I don't need to be on the sidelines. I like to watch. I like to observe. I like to scout. That's me. I'll go to a game to watch. You'll never know I was there. Like as far as when I was director of scouting, I wasn't as interested in the where are you going in the recruiting aspect of things. I just kind of hover in and hover out, and you never even know I was there. But I think we need to do something this year. This community has gotten big enough and great enough with guys like you, Sam, that I think we need to do something for sure this year, where we have a meet and greet of some sort. Maybe even a pregame. We'll figure it out. We need to do that. I mean, shoot, we got 200 people watching right now. We get half of those for a Falcons for Breakfast show someplace. We'd have a hell of a party. Chris says, do you think our defense ends up ranked 20 or higher? So for me, again, if I go to 2024 defensive stats and I'm looking at like yards per game, the Falcons at 345 yards per game finished 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 23rd. Does it feel like a 23rd ranked offense to you? They're only 3 spots away from 20. If I go to points, they are in the same neighborhood. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 32 minus 10 plus 1 is 23. So they finished 23rd in both points and yards. In both points and yards, do I expect them to finish 20th or higher? Yes, I do. That isn't as important to me as how they finish those numbers, because I can give up more points if I'm also getting more stops. I know it's hard to explain, but the Falcons kept points and yards down by artificially taking the air out of the ball. The other team would go on 13-play, 10-minute drives and either kick a field goal or score a touchdown. Okay, well, you only give up 3 points. Yeah, but our offense only had 1 possession in the first quarter. We'd see it. We'd see games where there'd be 4 possessions in the first half. You kept the points down, but you're losing. You're losing, 10-3. You probably missed the field goal. You're losing, 14-7. And you've only had the ball twice. So I want to see better efficiency. I want to see better third down efficiency. I want to see more pressure on the quarterback. I want to see the passing efficiency go down, where you've got, again, a 70% completion rate is absurd because you're not covering anybody and you're not rushing the quarterback. The cornerbacks are 15 yards off the ball and Justin Simmons is playing in his own end zone. That's got to change. So will they finish 20th or higher in points and yards? Probably. But can they get out of the 30s in third down percentage, and points per drive? Those are the kind of things I want to look at. And 20 or higher would be very, very good, I think. I'm not expecting a miracle from last season. There's a lot of new faces, and they all have to kind of come together. And you're depending a lot on players who haven't played before. That's the scary thing. It's like, will Leonard Floyd be an upgrade on Matthew Judon? The Matthew Judon we saw last year, yes, I believe he will. Justin Simmons wasn't much of a player for the Falcons last year. I don't blame Justin Simmons for that. Grady Jarrett was okay, but Rook coming in, can Rook be better than Grady was last year? Maybe, because again, the defensive was so poor. But we're counting on guys that we've never seen play before, like Rook, James Pierce, Jalen Walker, Xavier Watts. There's 4 rookies, maybe even Billy Bowman. Rook's not a rookie, but you understand what I mean. There's 5 guys that haven't really taken any snaps in the NFL that you're kind of counting on to take some big minutes for this team. The other part of it, though, is I've got some wild cards out there. And Troy Anderson. What if Troy Anderson comes back fully healthy? He's a difference maker. If he can play for a full season. The upgrade in Divine Diablo over J.C. Landman and J.C. Bertrand and Nate Landman, they're the same guy to me. They're both, day 3 undrafted free agent, not very fast, do a job linebackers. But Divine Diablo can make a difference. He can make plays. He's not just going to make tackles. He can make plays. So we'll see on that. There's so many questions. Y'all have asked me before, what are you most excited to see? I'm interested to see how this defense comes together because there's so many new faces. There's so many question marks. And in this equation of X times Y equals Z for the Falcons, the X factor is the defense. That is the big variable here. Kind of know what we're getting out of the offense. At least we think we do. It's chock full of first rounders. We saw Michael Penix last year, 11 starters returning. We have a pretty good idea of what we're getting. Offensive coordinators back. There's not a lot of change. We've got a pretty good idea what we're getting there. Kicking game should be better. There's no way you can go through another season with like 60% kicking, last in the NFL. The kicking game should be better. And then the defense. How much better the defense is from 2024 to 2025 will determine the season for me. It could be the difference between 7 wins and 12 to 13 wins is on Jeff Ulbrich and that defense. That's the big X factor for me. Corey talking about, at 9-8, I think the staff is in place. I think anything another that, and it's not rebuild time, it's start over time. And yeah, we'll want it 3 years for these guys because the situation that this staff came in, this was supposed to be a playoff ready roster. When Arthur Smith took over, it wasn't. It was an old aging coming off of a really good Falcons best run in their history for the most part over the last 15 years with Matt Ryan, and was old, expensive, salary cap hell, and done. And it was ridiculous that they wouldn't use the word rebuild. I thought it was kind of funny, actually. Didn't save their jobs, did it? But it was a rebuild in 21, 22, and then 23 was supposed to be a year we were going to the playoffs. Oh, the only reason you didn't was because you didn't have a quarterback. Okay, well, we've got a new coach. Here's a new quarterback. Oh, here's another new quarterback. So you should go to the playoffs. They didn't. They didn't have a winning season again. Expectations were different for this staff. And then with Terry Fontenot, who gets 6 years? Who gets a 6th year after 5 losing seasons without ever having a winning season, to mind you? There might have been a team that a guy kept his job, like, let's say Chris Ballard up in Indianapolis. It feels like they haven't had a winning season in a while. He's still there, but they've had some success. He's had some success. Who keeps their job for years for a 6-year rebuild? So 9-8 would be close. 8-9, I think there's definitely trouble in there. Let me see here. Big Low Country, good to see you. Because do you say Superman chat? Because I always just heard that's a super chat. What in the world, Bo? What's up, Scott? I'll be at training camp this year. It'll be great to see you there, my friend. Absolutely. I'll get out there just to say hello to some folks. And again, the problem I have with training camp is you don't learn anything. I got hell. I was on the Broncos podcast. And someone asked me if I went to OTAs. I'm like, I wouldn't go to OTAs across the street, let alone, the Broncos OTAs. And someone's like, man, you can really tell when Scott's not a Broncos fan. I'm like, brother, I wouldn't look out my window to watch OTAs. There's nothing going on. I'd rather turn on 80s clips of Jazzercise because that's all they're doing is walking around. Training camp is a little bit better, but again, you don't really learn anything until there's someone on the other side of the ball that that is wearing a different helmet, wearing a different color helmet. So I'll get out there just to come see y'all though, for sure. So we'll see. And then, see again, it ends up being about family here. Carrie's going, Big Low Country's going, Sam's going. I might have to get out there and say hi. Says I'm going to try and make it to training camp in July. I hope to see you there. You too. See, and that's when it becomes fun. What do you do? Then it's a social gathering. How did Clark Phillips look at nickel? Well, he looked great walking through in his big time jog through. He looked great. Oh, they're not. How did the new linebacker Divine Diablo look? They're not allowed to hit. There's no tackling. So it's really tough to evaluate football players in practice situations. That's why I love the Senior Bowl, man. I love going down to the Senior Bowl. Those guys, that is an evaluation camp. They are out there trying to go through the same rep. They're out there trying to weed out who can do what, and it is extremely competitive. Raymond, good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you being here. And then Tony, I guess this happened Monday after I decided not to come on. That who got well? It was Jair Alexander. That was who it was. But Ramsey and it was Jalen Ramsey, and then the other question was Jair Alexander. But Tony says, I keep hearing rumors about trading for Ramsey. Is that really possible? The defense could be top 15 with Ramsey at corner. Yeah, I think he'd definitely step in and be a starter. And when we start talking about money and dead money, the dead money for Jalen Ramsey is almost exactly what it is for Kirk Cousins. Nobody ever says that, do they? Why would they be willing? You talk about burn relationships. You hear me say that all the time. Talking about why teams would do this, because this is more of a divorce where it could be addition by subtraction, where it doesn't necessarily make financial sense. Jalen Ramsey's got a $50 million dead cap hit, almost the same as Kirk Cousins. It's a lot of money. He's got a base salary of 1.25. So you're basically, if you make a trade for him, you're getting the minimum here. But he might not have a no trade clause. I don't know, but it would all depend on how much of the salary are the Dolphins willing to eat. And if they're willing to cut him, it means all of it. It also means the Falcons don't have a lot to trade. Excuse me. My toasted coconut coffee is fighting back. They don't have a lot of resources to trade with. Now, it would basically be a 1-year deal because they keep all of the guaranteed money on the dead money. So you could cut him next year. If you brought him in, you could cut him next season. Do you trade Kyle Pitts for Jalen Ramsey straight up? Kyle Pitts goes down and plays for Mike McDaniel and maybe is revived down in Florida, where he played his college ball in Gainesville. And, it feels a little bit more familiar, a fresh start. But you don't have a first rounder next year. You don't have a fifth. That was the one you gave up in the Xavier Watts trade. So you're already down. You're down to second, third, fourth, sixth, seventh, I believe, for next year. When are you going to trade for him? If they're willing to cut him, they probably wouldn't take a lot to trade for him. Okay, here's a 6th rounder and a 2027 7th. I don't know. Again, Tony, going back to it, we're all biased. My bias is I'm cynical. I don't expect my team to make moves. So therefore, I don't expect this to happen. The other one was with Jair Alexander. Jair Alexander, I didn't know a ton about. I was in college recruiting for a long time. I didn't watch the NFL other than just the Falcons for a really long time. I didn't play fantasy football, so I didn't necessarily know who Jair Alexander was. So I turn on, this is a year or two ago, I turn on a Packers game and I'm watching this because, now, hey, we're working in the NFL space. I turn on this game and I'm watching this and I see this guy. Do y'all remember Fabian Moreau for the Falcons in 2021 and how he would basically disappear on the outside corner? He'd let himself get blocked out of bounds. He'd backpedal out. Guys, it was a free sweep outside or a screenplay, anything. Just would not get. I said you could put a carton of eggs under his shoulder pads and he wouldn't break a one. I'm watching this Packers game and I see a cornerback pull a move like that. Just a total ole, run away from the play. I don't want to be involved. This is scary. I went, what in the F was that? And I looked it up. I'm like, who was that? How is this guy playing for the Packers in the AFC or the NFC North division, the black and blue division? And I look it up and it's Jair Alexander. He's the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. I went, are you kidding me? I would have cut him on the spot if money wasn't a factor. I would have cut him right there on the spot. Man, I don't want anything to do with Jair Alexander. I'll tell you that much. And it doesn't surprise me that it hasn't worked out when I saw a guy on the field that didn't want to play football. So Ramsey would be nice. Does he have other options? Where a team that is, again, viewed to be a little bit closer to a Super Bowl contender. Does he go back to the Rams? That makes a lot of sense. And I don't want anything to do with Jair Alexander. Nothing. I don't want anything to do with him on that one. So let me see here. I want to say hello to some folks. Bryce is from Pennsylvania. That's cool. I'll be down for week 1 for the Tampa game. Let's tailgate. Falcons fan and PA, man, that doesn't happen a whole lot. We get Braves fans. Braves country is kind of all over the place. The older guys like me that grew up with a Superstation. But the Falcons fans, not a huge fan base. So I'm sure you don't have a lot of Falcons fans that you party with in Pennsylvania. So come on down. Let me see here as we're going through. We're already 42 minutes into this thing. How did that happen so fast? This has been a fun show. Let me see here. Red Swarm always has something good to say. Let me see what Red Swarm has to say. Good morning, Scott. Just read through the PFF article on cornerback targets by type. D. Alford was in a word horrible. What is a move you think we can make to upgrade his position? And Red Swarm, you are right. Alford was poor last year. So the Falcons have already made a couple of moves to increase the competition. One, they re-signed D. Alford. Okay, well, why would you do that? Because he's got $200,000 in guaranteed money. What that means is there is zero guarantee he makes the 53. He has no guarantee at all. The Falcons are not tied to him at all that he makes the 53-man roster that he is on this team. They drafted Billy Bowman, 4th rounder, with the idea of this is a former set, a little bit undersized for safety, has some corner in his locker, and they want him to start. I don't want to say start as in be the starter, but probably they'd like him to be the starter. But they want him to start out at nickel. They want him safety mentality, a little bit more physical, with the safety mentality. So he's bringing a more physical presence against the run. Smart guy. So they want him to go in there and compete at nickel. And the other one, Daniel Flick is actually he's headed for camp here in a minute. He's been staying with me the last couple of days. He'll probably come in and pop in and say hello and goodbye as he goes off to training camp. He says, "Is there anything you want me to ask while I'm there?" And I'm like, dude, the kind of questions I'd want to ask they won't answer. Not publicly, at least not honestly. And one of those is, why did it take so long to move Clark Phillips inside to nickel where he belongs? Because the honest answer is probably, Scott, we were so bad at that position that we didn't have any choice. No, he isn't That's not his best position, but he was better than anybody we had out there. Okay, they won't ever say that, but that's probably the answer. Because the answer can't be, oh, we thought that would be his best position, because it's not. He's undersized. He is not, a physical freak from a height, weight, speed standpoint, athletically. But he's got brains like a Stanford safety who's been playing in the NFL for 10 years. He is a instinctive, ball-hawking playmaker who is undersized and under-athletic. What do I do with those guys? I move them inside. I don't put them on a boundary against the freaks of nature that play wide receiver in this league. I get them closer to the ball. In football, the farther away from the ball you are, the more athletic you have to be. It works on the offensive line. It works at cornerback. It works at wide receiver. If I've got a big lineman, I start him at tackle. If he's not good enough to play tackle, I move him to guard. If he's not good enough to play guard, but he's smart, I give him a chance at center. If he can't cut it at center, he's off the team. If I've got a big defensive tackle, if a big defensive end, he's not quick enough on the outside, I'll try him inside. If he's not good enough inside, I move him to the offensive line. Cornerbacks, wide receivers. What do we do with a guy who's not cutting it outside? We move him into the slot. What do we move him with a guy that isn't good enough on the outside? We'll give him a shot at safety. Old safeties don't move to corner. Old corners can move to safety. So the long-winded answer for this is Clark Phillips is going to get a chance, Billy Bowman's going to get a chance, and D. Alford's going to get a chance. So there's three guys competing for that nickel spot, which is again, competition. Good, and that's good. There's three guys competing for that spot, which means by default it should be upgraded. If D. Alford wins it because he's in a better spot and a light comes on, fine. I don't care. I really don't. I don't care who wins the spot. If Braylon Trice, who I've said, tried to knock expectations down for Braylon Trice, if he comes out of this thing and wins a starting edge spot over Leonard Floyd, Jalen Walker, Arnold Ebiketie, and James Pierce Jr., and Braylon Trice wins a starting role, by God, he's going to be a beast. I tell you that. I don't care who it is. But I want competition. I want competition at these spots, and there wasn't any last year. All these guys were written in Sharpie in May of last season in their starting roles. It was complacent, and it was soft, and it was painful to watch last season. I think most of y'all will agree with me on that one. So, and Chris talking about, Jimmy Lake was the big difference from Judon. The scheme was trash, and it wasted the talent of most of our defense. Ulbrich is a big upgrade over Lake, and his time with Saleh will be a positive difference maker. And again, I've said from the get-go, because this was the worst coach defense at a high level I think I've ever seen over the course of a season, literally. And I've been doing this professionally for 25 years. And, like y'all, I've been a draftnik and a fan of this. And enough so that I've made a living in football since the 80s, for God's sakes. And I don't speak with hyperbole. That was the worst coach defense I'd ever seen. It wasn't the worst defense I've ever seen because they had talent that could make up for some of the scheme deficiencies. We've seen defenses where, hell, that poor 2021 team with Ogundeji was that the poor guy out there, Ade Ogundeji, starting next to Taquan Graham as a rookie with Stephen Means on the edge, and then Eric Harris at safety, and that was probably a worse defense. But Dean Peace was coaching those guys up. Wouldn't it have been fun to see Dean Peace with that group last year? Hopefully we'll get to see that this year. We'll get to see Jeff Ulbrich. And I'm not saying he's a second coming of Dean Peace or Buddy Ryan or whoever you might think is, a defensive genius. Insert name here, Bill Belichick. Insert name here. But by default, he's going to be an upgrade over what the Falcons had last year because the bar was set so low. So that's my thought on it. Y'all are talking uniforms. Here we go. We got 95 North Falcons Talk Show. Check out their channel if you haven't already. Coming in with a question. And I'll hit on this one. Unless anything else comes in, I'll probably get out of here. But he says, what are your expectations for Troy Anderson? Has he, in your opinion, given ground to Divine Diablo? 95 North Falcons Talk Show. My expectations for Troy Anderson are zero. I said the same thing about DeMarco Hellams. I said the same thing about Braylon Trice. Now they're on the roster and they've got a spot and they've got talent and they've got potential, but they're coming off of injuries or are injured a lot. In the case of someone like Braylon Trice, he's never played as a third-round pick, was battling the athletic stereotype anyway because he's not twitchy enough for outside. And then he's coming off an injury. It wouldn't surprise me completely if Braylon Trice started on the PUP list this year and then worked his way back in. I consider this year a redshirt year for him. DeMarco Hellams, 6th or 7th round pick, really only played 4 games, coming off a season-long injury. My expectations for him for none. I'll get to this for a reason. Troy Anderson, I think he's a phenomenal football player. I think he is nuked up so much on his body that he's those guys that are at that level of physical condition. It's the difference between a diesel tractor and a dragster. The dragsters are blowing. They're hard to keep running. The diesel tractor, the guys in the trenches, those guys can go on forever. He performs, his physical performance is at such a high level that he's tweaking stuff all the time and getting hurt. So my expectations for him are 0. Now, the Falcons also have learned, and they treated the offseason like they don't have any expectations for them either. Billy Bowman is going to get a shot at nickel, but he's a safety. They signed Jordan Fuller. He's a safety. They drafted Xavier Watts. He's a safety. What's that tell me? DeMarco Hellams, you got a shot, but I'm not counting on you. They signed Divine Diablo because they know they can't count on Troy Anderson and that J.D. Bertrand and Nate Landman weren't good enough. So they signed Divine Diablo. Right now, Divine Diablo is my starting linebacker next to Caden Ellis. Troy Anderson, you better show me something. They went into the offseason showing they couldn't count on Braylon Trice. How? Well, they signed Leonard Floyd. They drafted Jalen Walker. They drafted James Pierce. Braylon Trice, you're still on the team and you still got a chance, but by God, we weren't going into this 2025 season expecting to put Braylon Trice, DeMarco Hellams, and Troy Anderson in the starting defense. If they earn their way into it through competition, then that's a very good thing. But there has to be competition. They could not count on those guys, and they didn't. They didn't. So my expectations for those guys is 0. And then whatever I get out of them after that is bonus. It's bonus. I'm rooting for them. Like I said, I don't care who wins the job. I want competition, and I want high pedigree competition. Divine Diablo is a good player. He's a high dollar free agent. A 3rd round pick that you're competing with at safety, DeMarco Hellams. That's high level competition. Edge, for God's sakes. We start talking about the edge position. I got 2 1st round draft picks now that I'm competing against. If I beat those guys out, that's high level competition. That's what I want. That's what I want for this Falcons defense. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun this year. On that note, y'all, I'm going to get out of here. I hope y'all have had a blast on Wednesday. Make sure you're going to falconsi.com. We had 10 stories from camp yesterday. 10. It's a 10. We had 10. 10 stories. Probably be that many again today. Daniel Flick's on his way over there. I'm going to be putting up video and editing stories all day long. So make sure you're hitting falconsi.com. That's Atlanta Falcons on Sports Illustrated. We will be back on Monday. That's all I got for y'all. I hope you had as much fun as I did today. We will see y'all later. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Thank you to my Super Chat superstars, Sam, Luke, Big Low. Thank y'all. Helps keep the lights on, helps keep my forehead nice and shiny on hot summer days and the dog days. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you later.